Hello, and welcome to our biweekly Devstream. My name is Matt, and with me, as you can see, is not HB. This is Alkas.
Yes,
Nuba, as most people probably know.
Yeah.
And next to him is Mark. We are here to talk about some more stuff. Obviously, we're a week later than normal. We've been hard at work, hard at crunching numbers, hard at trying to, move forward and plan the next couple updates. And yeah.
And reevaluating.
And reevaluate. Well, which you're going to find out a little bit about today. Mark, why don't you just take us off? Just start us off here. What are we doing?
Yeah. So we were around midsummer. We were getting pretty knee deep in. Okay, let's really start to dig into this. This winter update, this fall update, the stuff we're doing for fall. We started working on some of that content, and we were moving towards a plan. And then we were seeing okay, there's obviously some issues with the game right now. Maybe we have to reevaluate some of those plans, and maybe we have to change what we're going to be doing with the fall update. So. It sort of threw a monkey wrench in some of our fall update plans, and we end up having to change gears slightly, move some things around. We still have a direction we want to go into this year, and everything for the winter update is still right where it should be. But some of the stuff we're doing in the next month or so in the fall update, we have gone back to the drawing board and reworked a couple of things after talking to many of you in the community, after reading tons of Reddit threads, reading some angry reviews on Steam and things that are stressful to read. And it definitely, I'm not gonna lie, it's been a stressful period because sometimes we take some risks, we change some things. Obviously we did a lot of that in Update 26, and it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to. We knew that there would be there were some big risks because we were trying to go for some we had some goals that we want to accomplish in the summer update, and we never shy away from taking risks because we firmly believe that without taking the risks, without making the mistakes, without learning from them, we're just going to be stagnant, and as stressful and as much as I personally hate seeing players that are not happy, it's definitely a part of the game that we're playing, right? It's you can't try to make a game that is new and interesting and also not screw up a couple of things along the way. So that's the way we've done things for 3 years, and that's the way we're going to continue to do things. But the good thing is that I think that even though it takes time to evaluate some things and to figure out whether certain things are a signal that something should be changed or something that's just a noise. We've gotten both in the past, and when it's a signal, then we'll look to address it. If it's noise, then it will pass, and then the game will be better for it in the end. And we're sort of just really we've reworked a couple of things in the fall and for the fall update, and I'm excited about fixing some of the things that didn't quite work out, and also continuing to push towards that direction, making sure we don't lose sight of that. It's very important that on top of fixing problems, you're also pushing the game forward, because if you don't do that, you're just going to end up being stuck in problems now and forever, and you'll never see anything new, right?
Yeah, and I think we should always be, I think we also want to thank those in the community who, work through those these experiments and these risks that we take, and then they give us really good criticism, constructive criticism, feedback, suggestions. We really appreciate people kind of sticking through and working through these explorations along with us. So thanks guys and gals for.
Yeah, it's not an easy job. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, it's like.
Yeah, no, I've been up at night.
Yeah.
For some of this stuff. I'm not gonna lie, but the one thing that I am really excited about though is that I do think that everything that we've done, everything that we learned, we have to look at the long game, because we've always said, and I know a lot of people know this, but maybe a lot of new players don't know this. We're in this for the long game, and when there's speed bumps, we don't see it as like, oh, okay, there's this crazy problem. Let's all like panic and like, this is gonna be it for like Foxhole. That's we're gonna be here for years, and even if even if there's issues and it ends up being like a turbulent period for a longer period of time than we'd like, if in a year from now, it's like, I'm not saying it's going to take a year before we like fix things, first of all, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
if in some worst case, like a year from now, we take all the lessons, and in a year from now, everything is so much better, and we'd be able to move the game forward. That's really important to us, and because we're still going to be there in a year, we're still going to be there in like 2 years. There's so much of the game that we still have to build, and what excites me more than what we're doing right now is the lessons learned of how that's gonna help to make the game that much better in the future, right? So.
And like I kind of like to say, this is like the benefit of early access. Like this is we couldn't have done this without the ups and downs and the community. And I said this on the Discord earlier. Like as much as like sometimes it can be stressful to go through these sort of changes in the game. We wouldn't be anywhere without the community. The game doesn't exist without the community. So I just want to make that perfectly clear too.
100%.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to move on, or is there anything else we want to talk about before we get started?
No.
All right. So we have a special little new segment to start because HB wasn't here, and we always really suck at doing community highlights when HB isn't here. He's really good at it. So I came up with an idea, and I know that a lot of people really want to know what we think of their suggestions. And so I thought, we had this build suggestion channel up in the Discord for the new building update that is coming eventually. And so I thought I would pull a bunch of stuff that was kind of interesting or was repeated. The criteria was that it was interesting, that it wasn't just like a single feature, that it actually had to do with the building update, and that it was repeated a bunch. And I want to see what these guys have to think about it. So let's get to that.
And for the record, I haven't seen any of these, so this is all just going to be
just a total like.
It's going to be a surprise. Yeah.
Surprise. Yeah. All right, so let's move on. Let's go to the first one. Community suggestions roundup. So this first one, I'm not going to read all of these verbatim, but for the first one, basically there was a lot of people who were saying, why do we only have one kind of like sandbag? Why do we only have one kind of wall, et cetera, et cetera? Why don't we have a variety? And some of those suggestions kind of broke it down and like, there should be like a sub menu that lets us choose the shape or something. So what do you guys think about that?
I agree, and I think that definitely. So it's no secret that we're working on the base building update coming at the end of the year, and I think what we would like to see is a lot more variation, a lot more creativity involved in base building, and I couldn't agree more with these. I think for me, it's like it goes beyond the circular sandbag, right? It's like I personally wish there was more of like a toolkit that you can use when you're building out these sandbag walls and like fortifications.
It'd be super exciting to see what people do if we do give them more of these variations, because when we gave them the double sandbag, like the sandbag upgrade, like the stuff that people were building just those like 2 sandbag things. It was like,
They were building like sandbag castles.
yeah, they were building sandbag castles. They had like, just with like these 2 things, the amount of like variation, the amount of like, you know, work that these guys were putting in was super exciting to see. So if we are able to provide more variations, that'd be even better. So
I mean, even if you think about it just beyond the context of like sandbags, if you have like a pillbox and that pillbox has different variations, different angles, different sort of things that could be covered, like it still could follow the fundamental rules of like a pillbox, right? That it has a limited firing angle, but that angle can be more tuned to different like situations. Like maybe it's set in a corner so that if it's built with a bunch of other sort of fortifications, it fits better into a corner as opposed to just jamming like the normal pillbox in.
yeah,
I think just having that kind of variation could be really interesting.
yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next one, which you have control of. So I thought this was really interesting. Captain at Arms' suggestion was just simply a rivet gun, but I thought it sort of spoke to a larger spirit that Mint did very, very briefly touch on, which is the idea of power tools that can actually speed up logistics, but they do cost maybe more materials or require extra logistics work to set up. Like, I think it's a really interesting idea, especially if there's some kind of like requirement to using these power tools, like some kind of something that powers them, if that makes sense. Yet you can then increase the speed of building.
I mean, I think in general, it's one of our loose goals to reduce the amount of hammering in the game. It's tough because hammering is sort of associated with like, it's sort of inherently an anti-spamming tool, but it's also can be kind of like tedious. And I think that like sort of, I don't know if like we'd add a tool to address that. It's possible. But I definitely think the overall goal of like reducing the amount of hammer strikes in general, or at least making that process a little better, is definitely something that that I would like to take a look at, right? Because just holding down your mouse button and just hammering, having lots of hammering activities is not the answer, right? I think some hammering is good because it makes it like tactile, but overall, it'd be nice if there was a bit less hammer strikes.
Yeah, I also think it would be cool to, provide specialized tools that, people, that brings in a little more depth to the logic game.
Absolutely.
Mint's like, the power tool suggestion, like,
Right.
if someone is willing to incur the cost of, producing specialized tools for, they want to like be like, oh, I want to be the demolition guy and I'm just going to go run around with my jackhammer or something, right? And or even just a little more progression right into the logic game eventually would be super cool.
Mm-hmm. I think the spirit of the idea that I really liked is just you can optimize your workflow a little bit more than is currently possible. Whereas like right now you have to hammer. You're gonna hammer.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, you're hammering. And this idea to me was like, oh, there's like a path.
Yeah, like speaking to sort of like investing in your workflow, the one thing that we do see is players really pushing into almost naturally, even though we haven't really given them enough tools for it, but sort of naturally pushing into this idea of like mining bases. And I'd love to see some things in the game that could help players that, for example, the ones that do want to build like a mining base, help them to optimize that mining base for their workflow, right? I think that'd be really cool to see.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next one. It's 2 more. So this was something that I think we've all probably thought about. This is not a new idea, but it came up in a couple different ways in the Discord. And the general idea is like, especially for smaller things like fences and barbed wire and sandbags, the idea that you can deploy and redeploy them a little bit easier than having to completely destroy them, or in the case of barbed wire, like dismantling them, because you could hypothetically redeploy something. And there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of this with, you know, things like tank traps and things like why couldn't we move tank traps? Why do they need to be destroyed? That's kind of like a really good question, right?
Well, I mean, I think it'd be really cool if some of these things were less structures and, you know, as this suggestion implies, more mobile and maybe can be moved around with a crane or like the flatbed truck.
Yeah.
I think that was when we introduced the crane and the flatbed truck. That was the starting point of less static structures, right? Still structures. So it's not like it's not like a field artillery where you can like push things forward, but more. When you think of World War II, like just thinking about like the visual references alone, right? Just go on like Google and search for like World War II logistics. You know, one activity that we actually did that activity like several times. Most recently, like a few weeks ago, when we were planning some of the stuff for the winter update. You just see the same things over and over again, and that is like people with shovels. People like digging, and you see like people moving sandbags around, like literally moving sandbags around. You see like people carrying like jerry cans, and like you see a lot of cranes, right? And like when we go to like design new features like this, we not only look at like the game mechanics, but what we started doing heavily this year is that should be only 50% of it. The other 50% should be like, look at the feeling of all this stuff from these like visual references.
Yeah.
How can we map that onto the game mechanics, right? And it's very important because we can't always just be focused on the game mechanics. We have to focus on the feeling of, ultimately, we want to provide like an authentic World War II, World War I style of warfare, right? And a part of that is making sure that you are dealing with cranes, you are dealing with like moving sandbags around, you are dealing with like, these sorts of things, right? So
Yeah. Any thoughts?
No, yeah, I like it.
Cool. Well, that's good.
last one.
Yeah, last one. This was by far the most repeated thing in that channel. It's pretty simple. We should have more information when building. There is currently just a small blueprint that shows the footprint of the building. That is it. That's all the information that we get. And I think this is a really valid thing. One of the reasons I really love these suggestions in particular is there's a variety of different cool ideas as to how to visualize it. But we also ran into this problem in Fortified. This isn't like a new problem for us to solve.
Yeah.
So I do think like we have experience actually like doing this as well. So, we should, maybe it's something we didn't really super think about.
Well,
in the way that it's sort of being discussed here.
Yeah, I think that like a lot of the building type features, one of the reasons why it seems like we've ignored it for a while is because we knew that we're going to come back around and revamp the whole thing, right? And we didn't want to work on something in between only to throw it out. I definitely think that having more information for building is a good thing, right? I think even beyond like tools like this, just things to like assist players in building more like organized bases would be nice, right? I think building is one of the oldest systems in the entire game, probably at this point, Matt.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's been there. It's been like that for like a reason, right? Because we're gonna come back around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just love the idea of like, I think the thing that really resonated with me about this is like I'm a planner when it comes to these kind of things. When it comes to strategy games, I like to know, if it's a turn-based strategy game, I want to think 3-4 turns ahead. It's really hard to do that if you don't know exactly how everything works in Foxhole. If you don't know how, like, in a game like Fire Emblem or in a game like XCOM, they give you the percentage of like the hit and everything that you're going to need to know to make that move.
Right.
So if we're sort of extrapolating that to Foxhole in this way, it'd be really good to be able to know like, okay, I'm going to be able to hit people that come at these angles. I'm going to be able to hit people. Now, how we present that information, I don't really know, because obviously, I think it gets difficult when you have like floating laser beams to kind of show where things
Yeah.
are in a game where we're trying to be as like sort of tactile as possible. So I'm not maybe there's a really creative solution for that. But you guys have suggestions.
Yeah, if you have a tactile way of indicating to a user where where the line of sight is or the effective range is and stuff like that, without like lines and glowing circles everywhere, send us a message.
All right, and that's everything. And if this is something that like works for you guys and you're interested in, we can do this more frequently. Yeah, give us your feedback. All right, Mark, take it away.
Cool. All right, so what we are working on. I actually wanted to spend some time going through the roadmap for. There's a black marker there on the slide that
Will make sense later.
will make sense.
You are here.
It's a screw up. My slide skills suck. But I want to walk through some of the roadmap this fall between now and the winter update. Our original plan was for fall to be a little bit of a bigger update, but like I said at the beginning of the stream, we've kind of like reworked things a bit, and we're kind of breaking out some of those features that we'd originally planned to other updates this fall period, and also some of it being pushed to the winter update, so we can go back and like rework some of the address some of the issues of the now, right? So, Matt, you want to switch back?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna walk through this quickly, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the fall update. But some of the stuff that the big things in the fall update, we're gonna finally see a revamp of the spawn system, and I'll talk a little bit about that more later. There's going to be a new feature / revamp called region zones, and there's going to be more content, more features. And again, I'm gonna come back to this, so I'm not gonna like dwell too long on this now. And that's going to be September, and then in October there's going to be the Dead Harvest event 2.0. Basically, we know you guys have been asking for it, and we don't like to spend too much time on special events like seasonal events and stuff, because we like to focus on the core game. But we realize if there's one seasonal event that we are going to keep, it's going to be that one.
Yeah.
But it's going to be different this year, so it's going to be exciting to talk about. It's going to be an entirely different format, but there will be some similarities, but a lot of it's going to be really different. And we're also going to be spending some time working on the collaboration tools in the game, right? So essentially improvement on the player operations, regiment system, squad system improvements. This is something that we've wanted to improve for a very long time, and things get pushed back in the schedule constantly. But we really want to make a stand this fall and really finally going deep and work on this feature, right? And obviously there's going to be some other things there that we're still trying to figure out. In November, we sort of have the pre-winter update, and this sort of doing some changes that things that we want to test before the winter update, because the winter update we're going to be putting in some big features, and we want to make sure that certain, both technically on the technical side and on the gameplay side, are going to work ahead of the winter update, so that we're sort of able to like mitigate some of that risk. Sort of like launching out a big update is a lot of risk, and want to sort of break out some of those chunks and make sure they're well tested before the winter update. And then finally, the winter update is going to bring the base building revamp that we've been talking about for a long time, more system changes, probably the biggest content drop of the year. It's going to be huge, and I really can't wait for it. And that's sort of what to expect between now and the end of the year. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit more about the fall update. So we're going to be we're going to be going into detail all the features in the fall update on the next stream, but I didn't want to wait until then before giving some better like indication on where it's heading, right? So sort of like we're gonna talk about things at a high level in this stream, and then the next one is when we're gonna sort of like fill in all the details because some of those details are still being sorted out. So fall update rework. So fall update has been significantly reworked to address current issues. Like I said, we did the stream, we went back to like reevaluate some things, and we're going to be incorporating that in. What you can expect, we're going to rework parts of the economy. This is probably one of the biggest things, and I want to spend a few moments in talking about this. This, obviously, the biggest thing that triggered this rework is that we knew was something that we sort of were definitely strongly sensing, and we were working towards a solution for, which is the issue of the barrier to entry for certain content in the game, like tanks and things like that, have become sort of outside the reach of many players, especially players that aren't in clans, and that was something we did sense, and we were working towards some solutions. But when we went back to think about it further, we sort of realized it was a much larger problem than just simply that, right? It's because we were looking at the numbers and we were seeing, okay, there were definitely tanks being fielded, there were definitely lots of howitzers being used. So what's the problem, right? But after talking to a lot of players, we realized that, it's not always just about the numbers, right? Beyond the numbers, it's very important to like take a look at player like feelings. Like it's also important to if in general a lot of players, or at least even some, right, are feeling like they're not able to, they're frustrated in some way. That's a serious issue, right? So what we realize is that the place where that didn't work out with the with some of the economy revamp we did it in update 26 is we had this goal of like strategic resources, right? And we wanted to make sure that we were taking steps towards that goal, right? And we took steps towards that goal, but the issue, that the part where that didn't work out was that we by doing that, we subtracted big portions of regular players like workflow, right? Like we basically took away what a lot of players felt like was a standard part of the game, right? We subtracted that out from their experience. So a big part of the experience that they really liked was now gone, or like they felt like they had to go through a lot of steps just to reach that point, right? And that's really like struck home with us, and that's something that we really want to address, and to make sure that a lot of this game that was there previously for a lot of these players, we really want to like restore that back for them, right? But this is the important key part of it, though. We don't just want to go back to where we were, because then what was the point of this entire thing, right? So we have a plan to do that in a way that is going to keep the strategic aspect of the resources, but it's gonna be a lot more like, okay, most people are gonna be able to still have all these aspects of the game that they were used to, but if you want to go like above and beyond, you can get access to like more special parts of the game, and those parts are gonna have a higher barrier, but it won't be subtractive from the game that these players have already, right?
Yeah.
So I understand that, like, you probably really want to know what these changes are, but we're still working out the final details, and I really don't want to talk about a bunch of stuff and in the next stream, like, we're just going to change some of it. So, but I just really want to say that, like, we definitely recognize this as like an issue, and our goal is to restore back those parts of the game that we understand that we have like subtracted from at least some of these players, right?
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of this economy rework is going to be happening, and I going to have a lot more details to share on the next stream. Moving on. Yeah, so that bullet point there, reduce barriers to access content like light tanks, but this extends beyond the light tanks, right? I think this extends to a lot of the content that, you know, we've sat down, talked to a lot of players. They've cited specific things that they used to be able to do, like easier access to like artillery, easier access to, you know, basically all these things that they felt like were a part of their core game, right? Logistic quality of life. This is another thing that we've sort of heard a lot from players, that certain things they're just have become too complicated to do things. You know, again, this theme of doing things that they were used to, and you know, going back to us wanting to move the stick forward in terms of the goals, but then it also like ends up adding strain to other parts of the game. We really wanted in update 26 to move the stick forward in terms of improving like the resource gain, relying less on UI and making the game a lot more like tactile, and you know, adding things in like shipping containers and resource containers, so there's just more options for Logic players, and there are more options now. You can use shipping containers. You know, I saw recently a thread on Reddit where players were doing a comparison between using a flatbed truck and like a normal truck, and sort of like where the trade-offs are. So we accomplished that goal. But on the other hand, we also added some more strain. Like there's things like not, you know, it's difficult to have to submit a resource container to like a refinery, and then you have to like pull the resources back out. And then sometimes like there's too many trucks in front of like a refinery, and you know, there's a list of things that we compiled, and we might not get to all those things. I know we won't get to all those things, but we're really trying hard to at least try to tackle some of the top issues there, and try to remove some of the strain around that, right? Around that process. So, spawn system rework. So some of our goals with that is we want to give players more control over the fast travel and spawning system, right? So right now you're sort of at the whim of the home base assignment, where sort of the game assigns the home base for you, and sometimes that location might not be ideal, or players try to work around it by not building up a home base, and it just like we feel like all that just it's long overdue for a change, and the kind of system that we want to install there is to ultimately make it more of a player driven system. So players are going to like decide where essentially players are going to decide where their army is, right? Basically where players are able to like respond to in the conflict, and where essentially where players are. And you know, there's also these little like edge cases, sort of these like cheap aspects of the existing system that you know, we just want to make sure that we like address all those things, right? So this is one of those like systems that I know that I knew well myself. We're really excited about it, but it's not really like a front-facing, exciting. You know, it's not like we're adding a new tank or you know, something of that sort. But it's exciting to us from the mechanical standpoint, because it's really such a core part of how a war plays out, and yet there's a lot of things about the existing system that is broken. So sort of like a behind the scenes really exciting thing for us, right?
Yeah, I'm excited for this because I think it has the potential to really change how people play the game, how the war progresses, how the front line moves. I think it has a lot of potential. It's just definitely not a. We can't like put it on a marketing piece and be like, wow.
Get ready, guys! Spawn system rework. That's
Get
the
ready.
most exciting feature of the year. Like, no, it's more of like a behind the scenes type of cool
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
That players will like. Hopefully, it'll just sort of be like silently working well, as opposed to like
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
a big thing. But yep. And then there is region zones. So I think that like. So this is something that we probably gonna have to talk a little bit more about next time, but essentially we really want to make better use of the space in the world, and we want to almost add more density, more almost add more to the world without just simply adding more regions, which is the best way that we kind of have been talking about this like internally, right? Make it so that when you are conquering a territory, you're not just sort of like, having one point of progress in terms of capturing a town over this long period of time of this long space in the world. We really want players to invest more within a region and not just sort of see these regions as like, a one region per stepping stone, right? We want there to be multiple stepping stones inside each region. And we, in update 26, we drastically expanded the world, and we knew we wanted to come back around and fill in some of these places that I know, I know this is something that Matt has been talking about, where there are certain spaces that we wanted to come back to because we know that there was a lot more work to be done in them, right?
Yeah, and I also should preface this because I see a bit of confusion in the chat. We are not adding more maps. We are making better use of the maps.
Yes.
And you'll learn more about this once things are a little bit more settled. This is more of a feature than just like adding some more rocks.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
And
I'm being a bit vague, and I'm sorry, but we just don't have the stuff to share yet.
Yeah, and to be clear, like to be super clear, we're not adding more regions at this point.
No.
Yeah. And is part of this is we're gonna rework the way that forts work. Right now we definitely feel like mechanically they're working. I won't say they're working well. I think they're working.
It brute force works.
It brute force does its job. There are a lot of issues with it, and it's another area that we're gonna wanna take a look at. New artillery related features. I'll just sort of talk about this last 2 points. We're gonna for players who enjoy using artillery, there's going to be some new features there that will expand out the artillery game a little bit, and to come with that, so on top of that, right, there's going to be we're finally going to swap in the faction specific versions of the last things in the game that don't have faction specific versions that are not Logi vehicles. Right? So what we have here is the colonial field artillery, and I'll get to the other slides because we have more of these faction specific variants to take a look at. But just to get through these last couple points, next dev stream is when we're gonna finally be ready to show you all these things that are coming in the fall update in fuller detail, and then we're targeting a mid to late September launch of this. But I think to summarize, I really think that half of this update is going to be okay. We're going to put in some new things that are cool. Half of it is we're going to rework some of the stuff from update 26. But it's, just to sort of make sure that expectations are set. This is not going to be a big update like update 26, right? It's just, sort of more like a medium-sized update. But, we're still really excited about it.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to go through these last couple of slides. This is the one we showed last time. This is the Warden Field Artillery. This is the new Colonial Field Machine Gun. And then we're going to have the Warden Field Machine Gun. And maybe those images can be posted afterwards or something. Yeah, I think, Matt, is there any other non-faction specific things non-faction specific vehicles in the game that we missed that aren't Logi? Someone's gonna call it out. There must be something we missed.
I don't think so anymore.
Okay, cool. That's it.
We need faction specific CDs.
I mean, they are. Just don't look.
They just don't look at it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, start asking some questions. I never got any questions this week, so I don't have anything to start with. All right, here's Mini Bar says, what do you think about giving players the option to handle a fixed number of buildings on a map so that they can build instead of letting buildings decay?
Giving players a fixed. Oh, like
Instead of
like,
decay,
oh, you can have
build
this many number of
3,000.
buildings and then they won't decay.
Yeah,
But
I
you can't
think-
build anymore.
Yeah, I think that's it's the. I like that idea, and I think that we would like to explore further. I think the main difficulty with that one has always been the issue of like players, like who decides what those structures are, right? If you get a couple of hundred structures, let's say you get like 500 structures, right? Who decides what they are? If someone goes off in the corner of the world and spams like a whole bunch of like lowest barrier structures, like the easiest to spam structure in the game, and just start plopping down a bunch of fences, is that going to cause problems? And I think there's ways to resolve those problems though. So I'm definitely not saying that's not a viable solution, but it's not a clear cut one. Mm-hmm. I would personally like to lessen the strain on the G supplies at some point, and I think we're probably going to review that in the winter update.
Yeah.
Grom asks us to tell a little bit more about what we've planned for Dead Harvest. Is it going to be on the same map? Is it going to be
Matt,
the same?
am I allowed to give them at least one?
Yeah. So I think we want to keep a little bit of a secret until we have some more to show, because it's exciting, and we don't just want to like put it out there. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to say one thing about it. I'm going to say one thing about it. It's going to be part of the World Conquest this time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger. It's a lot more ambitious, and I think it's a lot more fun. And you know, last year was a bit more of an experiment. I think this year we're like, yeah, we wanted to do something cool.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce that?
Illegal school?
Sure, we'll go with that. Are you guys going to stream PAX? I'm excited to see what you guys show there.
PAX has been Crazy Flying Chickens thing, so we should ask him. Are we gonna? I mean, I would like to personally. I'd like to do some streaming there, but I have to talk to Crazy Flying Chicken about streaming plans. I don't want to speak out of line.
I think we have internet this year, but I don't know if it's fast enough to do streaming.
Last year we did a stream at the evening event. The
Yeah.
Foxhole.
Yeah.
Foxhole Con.
Foxhole Con.
Yeah.
Dex Royale asks, are there any plans to change the landing ship? Right now they seem very niche and only useful in a few situations.
Yeah, I mean, we're on the same page. It is very niche. You're being nice when you use the word niche. What you're trying to say is that it's useless. Is that what you want to say?
It doesn't work the way we kind of thought it did.
Yeah, I want to see like, it's like beach landings is an area of the game that I would really like to reinvest in at some point. But I got to be honest, like our fall roadmap is there's so much work to be done. I don't know when we'll get to that, but I do agree with you that it is a bit useless, niche, whatever word you want to use. But I definitely think that's something we're gonna come back around probably next year. But you know, maybe like something that's always possible though, even for this year, would be like smaller tweaks. Maybe just some like balance, maybe some simple like balance changes to make it a bit more useful is definitely in the cards, right?
I think we have some ideas with the new spawn system as well that we're gonna consider.
Yeah.
If that can become part of the spawn system as well, that would be interesting. But that's still to be determined.
Yep.
HDrick94 asks if there has been any news on Chronicle of Ashes. Soon. TM. It's kind of a side project, so I can't always put like any kind of like priority on it. It's mostly something that's done in my spare time. So soon, TM. I don't want to leave it for too much longer. So there was a really good question, and I totally just lost it. Oh, here it is. Big Box asks, why don't you make flares and spotlights?
We might, the keyword is might, be talking about that on the next stream.
I think something that I've always wanted to see is spotlights. I don't think we're confirming that right now at all, but I do think that night lights has been, it's actually was there. To be honest,
We were talking about flares today.
yeah, we were talking about flares today, but to be honest, flares were in the game, or like night lights were in the game, like in in early Foxhole, before there was even like a Deadlands.
Right.
We did have night lights, but it was really bad for performance, which is why you don't see them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of technical barriers to that we hope we can figure out, and then if we can figure that out, then I don't see why not.
Torrento asks, is there anything in the game that we don't particularly like, but is necessary to make fair and stable? Also, nice haircut, Mark.
I think there's a giant list. I think our list is probably bigger than the lists that you guys have.
I mean,
out there.
cues. Who
Yeah.
loves cues?
Yeah,
Right.
we don't like. So the specific question was things in the game that are necessary, sort of like necessarily.
You
evils.
don't like, but
That we don't like, but is necessary.
Structure decay. I don't like that. I don't like cues.
I don't like border travel.
I don't like border travel. I wish we can like abolish that. I don't like forts because ideally they just weren't there and it was just like a continuous world. Man, I can just look like there's a lot of things, right? But see, I think the thing though is that making this type of game, the big, it's a very good question because this is what we discuss all the time, right? Is like our constant struggle, I think like almost every week, I would say, it always comes up of, okay, we want it to be this way so badly, but because whether it's like a game design, like barrier, like simply, like here's something as an example, right? Ideally, no one goes to sleep, everyone's playing the game, and you don't have like population changes at night.
Yeah, and it's permadeath.
And I mean, my biggest personal one, if I have to be, and it's so here's a couple of things. Now that it's jogged my memory, like I don't like the fact that people can respawn. It'd be way better if it was like permadeath. Everyone would actually be scared because without permadeath, no one's scared of dying. You get a lot of magical things out of that. Another big thing is like the AI defenses. I wish there were no like AI defenses, and it was just players sitting in Foxhole. I don't want anyone to actually sit in front of their computer all day, so don't take it as that. But sort of from the game design standpoint, I wish it was always players everywhere in every town, and there was players just waiting, right? I know it was a huge list. This is like half the shit we talk about.
I think this is like it's like necessary evils, right? It's like you have you don't like AI, you don't like people being able to it's like we're trying to create a realistic a war game, but then like we have to deal with the fact that your soldiers teleport out of the they just log off, right? Like how do
They
you
fall asleep.
Yeah.
how do you it's like okay, like half your army is
right
disappeared into another dimension. How do you make that a realistic
so the thing
war game?
So the thing that we always struggle with, this thing on the weekly basis I'm talking about, is we would be like, okay, there is this problem, right? This magical problem. If we can't get it 100% realistic, or rather like authentic, right, in the experience, what is the next best thing? Is usually what we do. What's the least magical? What's the next best thing we can do, right? And yeah, but it's like we talk about this all the time.
Yeah,
it's literally half the stuff we talk about.
Yeah, and there's also the stuff that we have to put in because of griefing as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that sucks.
That's a huge one that like we wish we didn't having a pull time, right? I mean, you can argue that like you're like assembling a weapon takes time, but you know,
I don't think we'd have pull time if it wasn't for griefing.
probably not. No.
I think we'd still arrive there because that's not realistic either.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have that in real life. You don't want to let somebody empty their like base in 3 seconds before the enemy arrives, right? So we would probably have to
there's an
add
argument
stuff
to be
like that,
made, yeah.
right? But I guess the thing with griefing is that that's also realistic. We have doors, we have locks at our doors in our houses because of griefers in real life that want to come and take your stuff. So it's, I guess humans are going to be humans.
The Coconut Net asks 2 questions that are related. One, is a random Kraken sighting a for sure no, or is there a 0.001% chance? And will we get whales too? Maybe. I'm going to say your 0.001% chance is probably, that's probably your best guess.
So what you're saying is there's a chance.
There's a chance. It's a small one, but there's a chance. Boyar Rex asks, will production parts and vehicle costs be switched back to how they were before 26?
I think that, so I would love to, I hate like not like directly answering this right now, but I really want to be certain that everything lands where it's supposed to be before we say it, but we're heavily leaning towards that sort of thing. I want to tell you guys where our minds are at, which that's where our mind is at. Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to make false I don't want to say what we're not going to, exactly what we're not going to do next time, right? So yeah.
The answer is basically like we're going to talk about some of that stuff, but not yet. There's a lot of I want to address this and I want to bring it up with you guys because there's a lot of salt and a lot of people complaining about player population and population imbalance, and I want to know your guys' thoughts on it and like where is Clapfoot's head when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, it concerns us too. I think one thing though is that we always like to look in the long term, and we've always found that making short-term like decisions based on short-term circumstances has never served us well, and we've been through like sort of much lower lows in terms of these sorts of statistics in the past, and our focus has always just been, let's just make the game better and make sure that we have a good, solid, long-term plan in place, and that's always worked for us, right? And there's no point in like dwelling on things that are outside of our control, and I think that there's always going to be ebbs and flows in things like player population, and not sure if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think some of these issues get really kind of highlighted at certain like update cycle, like at certain like
certain points in the update cycle.
It's kind of like cyclical, right? You have a surge of like new players, there's a good mix of like veterans and like new players, veterans teaching new players want to like join in clans, and during that time a lot of these issues get kind of like they don't really emerge as prominently, right? And like it's good for a while, and then it could be like people figure out like, oh, the meta is this, and it's some people think that's lame, some people think that's cool.
People also found like exploits.
People kind of like, and then all those the new people that came with the update, they kind of like they end up with like going towards one or the other faction, right? We've had instances where one faction was winning for a while, and then 6 months later it'd be the other faction winning for a while, and it's just kind of cyclical where like it just people naturally tend to like go one way or the other towards the end of these cycles, the update cycles, and we have we're always, thinking, we're always kind of, trying to come up with how can we manage like, this update cycle phenomenon, right? Like, how can we make it, do a softer landing, right? Rather than like a, like a harder landing. So, yeah, I mean, we have some ideas, and would love to hear your ideas, right? We have something, we were just saying how we hate queues, right? Everybody hates queues, but if there's a population imbalance, you have to have queues, right? So,
and like it's important. I think the most important thing that a good perspective is to look at the long term, right? I think it's a really important perspective, and I know it's easier for us to say than probably for it to be heard, right? Because obviously everybody wants things to be perfect right now, and we totally understand that. It's a fair thing. It's a fair expectation, but what we've learned is that when we look at the long history of the game, right? We've been doing this for 3 years. And at many points, but I would definitely cite one point in time, it almost seemed like players were really doubting the future existence of the game, right? And that was just literally a month before it became like the biggest game that we ever worked on as a studio, right? Yeah. And it's not like, I'm not saying that to say like, oh, okay, well, let's just not worry about anything. It's just going to be way better next month. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that to highlight the fact that it's really important to look at the long term, and not just sort of what's been happening in the last month and what's been happening the last 2 months. It's important to look at what's been happening over the last year, right? I think it's really, really important that we look at what's been happening over the last year, what's going to happen over the next year, right? On top of looking at just what's happening over the last month, right? Because if you just always look at what's happening in the last month, you're never gonna get anywhere, right? You're just always gonna be fixing your trail of problems, right? So it's
Yeah.
One last question, another one from the Coconut Nut, and this is a great one. Foxhole will go 1.0 for sure, right?
100%.
Yeah.
I promise you that we're going to be around next year. I promise you we're going to be around the year after that. We're in this for the long run, and I've been saying this. I mean, I think it's very, you know what? I think sometimes maybe what's a bad assumption that we make is that we're talking to the same people. I know I make that mistake. I know there's a lot of new people, or maybe people that have only joined us over the last half year or even last year, right? But this is a long-term thing for us, right? And through thick and thin, we're gonna work through it, right? And we're gonna be, right here at the end of the year. We're gonna be right here at 1.0. Currently, we're hoping for next year, right? I really, but you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I say. It matters more what we're gonna work on, and we're gonna get back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things, if you've been around since day one, or month one, or whatever you want to call it, one of the interesting things you can look at is this is how games are developed as well. You could really look at the progress and see from the very first version of Foxhole to where we're at now to where we'll be at in 2 years, and really see hopefully a sense of real progress.
I mean, I think to sort of try to get a good perspective over some of these concerns, Matt, because I think that they're fair, because there are games out there that
just ghost.
Sort of, goes from bad to worse. Devs make a bunch of promises, they don't fulfill the promises. Furthermore, they add in microtransactions as the final cash grab sort of deal.
Yeah. And
then the game is gone, right? And so it sort of, to be fair to these concerns, I definitely I can understand them, right? I can understand this kind of line of thinking, but sort of to sort of to reiterate our commitment, like, you know, we said 3 years ago we wouldn't have microtransactions to the game, and we haven't, right?
And we won't.
Yeah, and we won't. So, like, I don't know if, like, yeah. Anyways,
I think our entire team is pretty like anti microtransactions. So I don't think there's a single person who's like, yeah, no, that's a good idea.
yeah.
So I just don't see it happening. Anyway, PAX. Talk to me about PAX for 2 seconds. Do you have any idea of what's happening with PAX?
Yes, we're gonna be at PAX booth. I'm gonna get this wrong. 6817. Crazy Fun Chicken can completely correct me
put it
if
with
I was
chat.
wrong. Right. And we're gonna have a booth this year. So anyone who's going to PAX West, come and visit us. We're gonna be on the 6th floor. And there's also gonna be an event in one of the evenings. I have to look back at the schedule again. But anyways, talk to Crazy Flying Chicken. He's in charge of that show. And it's gonna be, last year was the best PAX that I ever been to. I really, really enjoyed the time I really enjoyed the fact that a lot of you guys took your time to come out, and we had a great time in the evening, and I can't wait to do it again, right?
Yeah.
I won't be there. I wish I was, but these two are going to be there, and HB and KFC. Right?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Well, they'll see you guys at PAX if you're going to PAX, and otherwise, stay foxy.